right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. We've got an awesome topic, and Tom is going to do a great job. I'll introduce him here in a second. But before we get going, let's go over some housekeeping. So, first, this is a Zoom webinar, so it is being recorded. Please take note of that. We love to post these up afterwards, so if you have to leave early, you can come on back. We will send the link out, don't worry. But please put your questions in the Q&A. We're here for your feedback. We're here to get your questions answered. We really want this to be interactive, so please get your questions answered today. And then, as you saw a preview of this slide, we will have the survey going out at the end of this. This is another chance to get your feedback, understand what you want from the Dell Technologies user community, how we can bring the latest and greatest to you, what topics are top of mind. So please fill out that survey. It's super beneficial for all of us. We really appreciate it. And 2 lucky survey participants will win a $25 Amazon gift card. And just a reminder, we've got 2 webinars rounding out the month. They're pretty back to back, but varying topics that we know you wanted to get deep into. We did Support Assist and Tech Direct last month. We got a lot of feedback saying we need a deeper dive. So we are bringing those deeper dives to you. We've got Support Assist deep dive on the 24th, and we've got Tech Direct deep dive on the 28th. I will drop those links to register here in the chat, but you can also go to dtuck.com/events and find all of our upcoming events on that page. Without further ado, you're not here to listen to me speak. You're here to listen to Tom. So Tom, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Just trying to put my camera on here. I'm going to give it a go with my bandwidth, and if I drop off, it just simply means it's because my bandwidth is getting a little tricky here. So good day, everybody. As Jack mentioned, I'm Tom Benz. I'm the product marketing manager for Dell Endpoint Security, and I handle a number of areas primarily below the OS security, and that also includes supply chain security. And let's just kick it off. Let's go into it right now, cover the agenda. And so what we'll cover today, we'll just give a brief overview, the cybersecurity state of the union, what's happening, what has been happening, particularly in the area of supply chain security. But we'll start with some broader strokes in terms of, in general, cybersecurity issues that we deal with and have been dealing with the last few years. We'll move into how Dell approaches supply chain security. And then I'll dive into a little bit more relative to the Dell supply chain safe supply chain solutions for supply chain assurance. So we'll introduce a concept or an idea, an offer or a solution called platform certificates. And our version of that will cover some other supply chain offers that we offer here, especially in North America, and then summarize and provide resources in case you want to get more information, read up on more about what we do, what we offer. So with that, let's get started. So cybersecurity state of the union. And just, the overall theme, endpoints are an expanding attack surface, and they're enticing to attackers as the payoffs can be huge. There is a recent MITRE attack framework that's been published. It shows that there are 9 initial access techniques that adversaries use to gain entry to networks. And what we've learned in the last few years is that legacy defenses aren't doing enough to keep endpoints secure. So just calling out a few of these, and Jack, if you want to move these slides forward. Thank you. And I think we can get that next one, because what we'll call out here is first, remote work has been happening. Obviously, with COVID, it's picked up. It's really exploded over the last few years. But remote work introduces new complexity and attack vectors. And according to a 2023 survey of global IT DMs conducted by Futurum Group, 69% of organizations report a hardware or a firmware level attack, and that's up 1.5 times just since the 2020 study that Futurum did. So just in 3 years' time, it's exploding, and it continues to go up. One additional stat, according to Enterprise Strategy Group, or ESG, I'll mention them a little bit later on, 69% of organizations have experienced some type of cyber attack as a result of poorly managed internet-facing assets. So supply chains is the other piece here, if you want to just animate one more time. Thank you. Supply chains responsible for 62% of network breaches, and that's according to a Verizon data breach investigation that was done just in 2022. And last but not least, 82% of breaches were driven by individual errors, and that's social engineering attacks, phishing, all those kinds of things that you hear about that your company may make you do tests on every year to make sure you're paying attention and following their rules. So the theme here is that endpoints are an expanding attack surface. Just a few more pieces here as we go into the next slide, the threat landscape. And so all those are things when you mention that you total it all up, that's what's keeping IT and security people up at night, device-based attacks. According to a recent global survey of IT and security professionals conducted again by ESG, as organizations source new hardware, their top evaluation criteria include three things. One, automating detection of BIOS firmware events. Two, high-risk configurations. That can include things like automatic updates and other things where there could be things without checks and balances that can create problems. And then validating the integrity of device configuration from the factory to protect against product tampering. And next slide. Thank you. So just a few more things to cover as we handle this, or as we cover this, the state of the union for cybersecurity. So overall, we're hearing that organizations really don't always know what to do about a security landscape that's constantly shifting and constantly changing. And it's no wonder why. The complexity, sophistication, and potential impact of attacks also have increased substantially over time. A single incident can lead to operational disruptions, lost revenue, compromised data, diminished productivity, and even tarnishing the brand or corporate reputation. So diving a little deeper into the endpoint threats we're seeing, one, cyber complexities are causing more opportunity for disruption as networks and devices become more interdependent and connected. Second, hardware threats are also increasing. As the sheer number of devices with smarts and connectivity increases, so does the possibility of having a vulnerability. Then there's always the specter of counterfeit parts, which may themselves be vehicles for threats. So much caution is needed to ensure that devices are authentic. Third is supply chain IT globalization, and that means that every business, every nation is more dependent on others to provide components that are critical for their operations. The fourth area is software threats. Software threats are among the worst of these since this is a source of many vulnerabilities. It could be intentional, like an insider threat, such as someone inserting subtle but malicious code into a core program, or totally intentional, such as bugs, or counterfeit certificates, as we saw in the SolarWinds attack a few years ago. But these are still threats, and it's a dangerous and dynamic environment, to say the least. And then the fifth area on here is regulation risks. And finally, these risks show that well-intentioned people can still create issues, especially when you have regulations on critical industries and compliance policies and controls then they could be at conflict of each other. So in the next slide. So other things that are impacting cybersecurity, and it's still, COVID, even though it's, more than 4 years out now, it's just an example of worldwide events that can impact us all. So COVID, various threats and attacks, global government responses have accelerated the move to zero trust and the zero trust strategies for organizations, as well as demand for secure access service edge technology, as well as managed security services. Secondly is the executive order that was signed back in May of 2021. This kicked off a large chain of events because it really dug deeply on a lot of things that we at Dell have always talked about, including supply chain encryption, data protection, and again, zero trust. And while highlighting technologies like XDR, EDR, encryption, and software supply chain security. Third, we've talked about for years about the breadth and depth of endpoint security, including built-in or hardware-based security, supply chain security. We've been, again, talking about for years and kind of carrying the flag as to the dangers that lurk. And then IDC published their report just a few years ago that validated this. So while we saw it was coming, we've taken actions to help prevent it. It's always good to have validation from a third party and analysts for, even if they're acknowledging the facts that we've seen over the years. Next is we all know from the news about high-profile attacks in endpoints in healthcare. So financial services and energy are other areas where there have been attacks, like the Colonial Pipeline attack from several years ago. These high-profile attacks are causing governments to take action and protect certain segments, which is a great start and will continue to improve and grow as we move forward. But what happens when something is protected is that the attackers move on to a different target that's less obvious and is softer. And that takes us to the next point, which is new emerging targets. And what we're seeing, what we're hearing is SLED, state, local education, government, and then SMB are the new targets. So basically, it's affecting everybody, and it's something that's going to grow with smaller businesses and smaller companies who need to take action as well. Last but not least, in 2022, some of the conflicts around the world drew attention to the fact that cloud security is great, but it's an instance where an entire nation has the internet turned off on premises. We're seeing air-gapped environments come back in a big way as well, and that supports the ability to act quickly, such as closing an embassy if you know that assets are going to be nationalized by another country. So all of these things are coming together, and it creates a big, scary world out there, especially as it pertains to supply chain security. And so the next section that we'll cover, we'll talk about how Dell approaches supply chain security. Okay, so just to oh, sorry, we have a poll. And this is kind of an open-ended question as to how you are approaching supply chain security. Um, no answer's wrong, no answer's bad. It's just good to see what kind of plans your organizations are developing, or are you relying on others, or have you not really approached a supply chain security strategy as of yet? So we'll give a couple minutes because I know, or a minute or two. I know it takes a little bit of time to type out open-ended answers. We'll give maybe 30 more seconds. And hopefully or there are some answers. I don't see the results on my side as the presenter, but I assume that we're seeing some answers coming through.
I can read off a couple of the answers for you just because I can see it on my end.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, so what we are seeing is so we've got people they're validating their suppliers. They are hold on. Yeah, they're from official suppliers, validating suppliers. They're going physical and web-based. They're watching and waiting, buying directly from vendors instead of resellers, automation, monitoring, working with partners to make sure it's up on compliance. We've got some people buying directly through Dell for their workstations because they know how important it is. AI-based tools, and then there's some feedback that not a lot of people are really bringing it up quite yet. So that feeds right into why we're doing this today.
Yeah, and that's great to hear. And just so people know, for us, it's good information just to understand where people are at in their evolution because it is a continuum. Not everybody has the plans in place at this point. They're starting to think about them, or they're relying on vendors, or they're fully engaged and they know what they need out of it. And it really depends on where a maturity level is at for organizations. And it's good information for us just to understand that there is a wide range of answers. So I think, Jack, your comments that you relayed to me just underscore that it truly is a continuum. You've got people at varying levels of readiness and strategic planning. So thank you for everybody for making your answers available to us so we can take a look at them. So how we approach supply chain security is the next section that we'll cover. And overall, supply chain, it's an expanding attack surface. I've thrown out a couple of study results, and here's another one. In 2021, 62% of supply chain attacks investigated by the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity were the result of misplaced trust in a supplier. Today, devices, and again, that's 2021, so things continue to grow. So I suspect the next survey results we see from the EU agency will be even higher. And that just shows today devices can be tampered with once they leave the factory while en route with very little traceability. So Dell Supply Chain Security Initiative takes a comprehensive approach to protect its supply chain and deliver solutions customers can trust. We've implemented cutting-edge programs across the full spectrum of supply chain risk, and these efforts ensure the security, integrity, and quality, as well as resilience of our products. Dell Technologies takes a comprehensive approach to protect its supply chain and deliver solutions that customers can trust. So I'll just cover a couple of these areas. Security, which covers the confidentiality and availability of information. Integrity, which ensures products or services are genuine, unaltered, and that they'll perform properly. Quality, which reduces vulnerabilities that may limit the function and lead to failure or exploitation. And then resilience, which ensures that the IT supply chain provides required products and services. So we've mapped the most prevalent and consequential supply chain attack vectors, such as counterfeit components, malware, firmware tampering. We've invested millions of dollars over decades toward reducing the introduction of malicious and even unforeseen activities into the supply chain. Dell's implemented cutting-edge programs across the full spectrum of supply chain risk, and that goes from our threat-informed product designs to training our tens of thousands of developers on secure development practices, to securing our factories, to logistics security programs, all the way through to post-delivery support and services. Our secure supply chain program aligns to and in fact places exceeds US government promoted best practices and standards. And we are constantly evolving and constantly improving. So it really is a moving target. We continue to stay on top of things and improve our processes. The fundamental objective here and for this effort is to ensure that the security, integrity, quality, and resilience of our products remains intact. You only need to look at the supply chain turmoil brought about by the pandemic and other worldwide events and realize that Dell was able to contain supply disruptions to a bare minimum, keeping product flowing to our customers in the time they needed it most. Next slide here, we continue to dive into our framework and our strategy. So the idea of a supply chain, it's way different than it was in the recent past. It's, used to be about putting products on a truck or a ship. Global complexities require that manufacturers pay attention to supply chain security throughout the life of a product. And at Dell, we divide this up into 4 quadrants: manufacturing, assembly and customization, shipping and delivery, and end user lifecycle. So let's touch a bit on that. We consider security throughout this process, and it's not just during the time that the device is produced, it's throughout the life cycle of the product. So starting with manufacturing, and that includes sourcing, Dell employs a rigorous partner screening process, and it often goes beyond the industry standards to ensure the quality and security devices and their components. These partners also routinely undergo audits to ensure compliance with Dell's comprehensive set of supply chain security standards. Next up on the right of that quadrant is assembly and customization. And in addition to adhering to Dell supply chain security standards, Dell device manufacturers also frequently test parts during manufacturing to ensure that counterfeit products do not sneak into the supply chain. To further mitigate this risk, unique piece part identification numbers, or PPIDs, you may know them as, labels, and they're affixed to specific high-risk components, and they contain information about the supplier, part number, country of origin, and date of manufacture so that Dell can identify, authenticate, track, and finally validate these components to ensure the customer receives exactly what was shipped. Third is shipping and delivery. And Dell Freight is protected through layers of physical security, from tamper-evident seals, door locking mechanisms, to a variety of tracking devices designed to detect if the Dell device and the Dell devices inside have been tampered with in transit. Now, Dell devices themselves also feature tamper detection technologies, things like chassis intrusion. We've got some other new features within our recent features within our hardware that a white paper actually covers as well, which I strongly encourage people to read, and you can find that on our website. I'll do a promo for that later on in the presentation. But um, so beyond the tamper detection technologies, we also offer additional services for North America, and this is an added level of protection that they can purchase through Dell SafeSupply Chain Solutions, which I'll discuss later. The other piece is verification. So Dell commercial devices ship with cryptographically signed platform certificates that capture snapshot attributes of platforms during manufacturing, assembly, testing, and integration. These platform attributes are then cryptographically linked to the specific device using the Trusted Platform Module, or TPM, you may be aware of, as well as the hardware root of trust. So I've covered the 3 areas. The last piece is the last piece is end user life cycle, and responsible device retirement. This covers the customer's device use, the end of life, and responsible retirement. The years that a customer has a secure Dell trusted device in their ownership, use at home or business, and that includes the licensing, the entitlements, the updates of everything from software to firmware to patches and all the way through. We ensure that all of this is securely delivered, and we consider that part of our secure supply chain. It also includes servicing the device, whether we're sending a physical part or sending somebody to work on a computer. We are still there with the customer as their partner, and we'll have to make sure that the device and their ecosystem is secure all the way through the device retirement. So I covered the areas on the left, but what about these other pieces on the right here? And these are security processes, and they're here to help ensure the security of the devices. And first, there's hardware integrity. That people typically think of hardware integrity as within this Dell supply chain as chips, motherboards, that kind of thing, high-risk components. Second is software integrity, and that's about ensuring that the code we develop for the BIOS, for the firmware, anything else which Dell uses to touch the device are securely developed, part of our secure development lifecycle, which I spoke. And then last, there's the physical security, and that's the facilities and all the people. And it's pretty incredible, and it's not something that always obvious to external viewers. The people who work on the devices are all validated with background checks, for instance, and our Dell facilities have security that is broad and deep. And having gone to one of our facilities here in the States, I can attest to that it's a pretty amazing process with secure structures, secure infrastructure, a lot of processes taken to ensure the security of our devices. But along every step of the way, we're testing and verifying. So we tell customers to not be afraid to ask if they want to add things within our customization process as well, in a response to fulfill orders. So that's all about the processes and the integrity of the supply chain. I think the next slide here dives just a little bit more into that in the summary. So just to summarize, that security is needed throughout the supply chain. It begins with the manufacturing process and continues on through assembly and customization to shipping and delivery. It even includes processes to ensure security for a product's end of life. And this is the value of Dell Safe Supply Chain. Customers can feel good that their hardware is tamper-free on delivery with Dell Safe Supply Chain, and that devices are not tampered with, or that customer counterfeit components, I should say, are not inserted before shipping. And then a reminder, Dell looks at several areas in ensuring the supply chain security. It's hardware integrity. This ensures that devices are not tampered with or counterfeit components are not being inserted. Software integrity, which ensures that no malware is inserted in the firmware or device drivers before shipping and preventing possible coding vulnerabilities. And then physical security, which consists of a high level of physical security in factories, robust screening, hiring practices, as well as annual compliance training and certifications. And again, that customization piece that I mentioned in the last slide, where people can add additional services at their distribution centers and other facilities if they so ask for them. Okay, so we covered what Dell's framework is for supply chain security. The next area will cover our actual supply chain solutions for supply chain assurance. And so the next slide will give an overview of what we cover. Our endpoint security solutions, we call it Dell Trusted Workspace, and it offers multiple layers of defense. So we'll start from the bottom going up, because this is the area that we're covering today, and it's one of my areas of specialty. That is built with supply chain security, and that's built with solutions, security-centric design, strict standards in supply chain, and that all ensures that the device is safe from the first boot. So we have other offerings within Safe Supply Chain, which again, I'll get to in a couple minutes here, but we cover secured component verification, which are our platform certificate solution. That's an offering reflecting the emphasis that Dell places on security across the supply chain. It enables customers to validate that PCs are delivered as they were ordered and built, and it ensures strict control of the IT environment. And then devices are further bolstered by supply chain integrity controls. Next up in that middle area is built-in hardware and firmware security. And this is proprietary hardware and firmware protections that help secure every layer of the compute stack by working to prevent and detect foundational attacks. Safe BIOS, which encompasses firmware protections embedded in the device. This is BIOS security. It's off-host BIOS verification to detect potential tampering in other areas, which we will cover at a future Dell Tech Communities webinar, and Safe ID, which is a FIPS compliant dedicated security chip, includes this security chip that secures user credentials and verifies user access. Safe ID is really all about credential security and that kind of thing. And then for added protection is the area up above, which is built-on security. And these are built-on solutions. It's software-based technology that prevents, detects, responds to, and remediates threats whenever they occur in an increasingly remote or on-the-go environment. And that includes safeguard and response and safe data. And these help businesses identify and address advanced threats across the organization based on deviation from acceptable behavior and the known good. These are typically software vendors that we work with. And again, one for a future webinar where we can talk about built-on software security and our partners that we work with very closely to develop these solutions. All right, so the next slide we'll dive a little bit more into the supply chain offers. And first on the list is something that, well, what I'll cover here is just a quick reminder, secured component verification. I talked about briefly about a minute ago. We'll get more into that now. Also offering tamper-evident packaging and things like device sanitation and hard drive wipes, which we'll get to at the end of this conversation. So before we do that, though, let's start going into platform certificates and our version of platform certificates, which is Dell Secured Component Verification. And I think we have another poll question coming up here. And the question is, have you heard of platform certificates or secured component verification? So this time we gave you an easy one. It's a yes or no question. So hopefully you can answer that quickly, and we'll share the results here in a moment. Okay, thanks everybody for your responses. Looks like it's about half and half, and not surprising for reasons that I'll get to in a moment here, but 48% of people who have responded said, yep, they've heard of them, and 52% have said, no, we haven't. So what is it? And let's move on, and we could talk a little bit more about that right now. So platform certificates, what are they? Well, they're supply chain security measures to ensure that high-risk PC components are not compromised or hacked en route from the manufacturer to the customer. It's a supply chain security measure that basically ensures high-risk components aren't compromised or hacked on the way in transit from factories or facilities to the doorsteps of our customers. Platform certificates, it's essentially a bill of materials or a manifest, if you might want to call it that way. And it's a bill of materials of high-risk components that are included with the device. Now, typically categorizes about 7 components in all as high-risk components, and these are things that store info, store data, store credentials. This is typically hard drive, processor, memory, the trusted platform module, which I mentioned earlier. There's about 7 or so components in all. And how it works is the manifest or bill of materials, it's checked and cryptographically signed by a factory worker. That certificate is stored, and it could be stored in a different place based on the solution. It could be stored on the device itself, or it could be stored in a secure cloud, which is, I'll get to in a moment. But we offer both versions of that depending on the region. So upon receipt, the customer, they'll verify the manifest through a tool. And the tool could be a third-party tool, which we make available on Dell.com support, or or some of the solutions that we offer, which is a combination of some of our software solutions. But there is a tool to basically, all the customer does is just verify that, hey, the bill of materials matches up what was sent out, what we got, it's the same. It shows us that there's been no tampering on the way, so we are good to go. And that verification tool just confirms just that. No tampering has occurred. The IT team can then go on with their deployment for the devices for the end users. So platform certificates is the segment or the overall industry. But the first added solution to cover is the secured component verification. And I talked about how that works, but bottom line is it's a way to validate the security of the product by providing that manifest. And that way they know what they ordered and they received is exactly what Dell built and shipped. So, okay, so now we talked about platform certificates, but why all of the talk? Well, there's a few things happening. And I mentioned that executive order from 2021 a few minutes ago. That executive order covered supply chain security, and the government was aware of this potential risk, and they wanted to address it early on. And so they put the statement out that platform certificates will become mandatory for certain segments, and that could be high-risk segments, infrastructure types of segments, as well as some of the high-level security areas within governments. So that was in 2021. Clearly, it takes a while for it to filter through, for organizations to become made aware of it. Last year, in fact, it was late last year, the NSA here in the US published a hardware procurement guide that was distributed to purchasers throughout their organizations. And that called for adding platform certificate solutions. In fact, it's becoming a requirement for upcoming US federal purchases. I think we're kind of in the middle of it now, is that mandate becomes, it cascades out to other organizations. It'll happen here in the next, potentially as early as early next year. And This document, I'm sorry, Jack, if you could just go back to the last slide, I'll cover one more thing there. So that area in the lower right-hand column, that is a document that was published by the Trusted Computing Group, which is requiring platform certs for each certificates for each device by January of 2025. So bottom line is these requirements are starting to hit federal purchasing requirements. And in a matter of time, these will be required for US federal government purchases. And at the same time, it's going to filter into other types of industries, commercial, on the commercial side. So it's happening. And now we can move to that next slide because where are the areas that is going to be designed for, who we're designing our version of platform certificates, secure component verification for. Federal, state, and local governments, they'll be required to have additional security measures. Large companies who will align with similar measures based on US executive orders. We're already hearing from certain customers. Customers that have greater need of IP security protection. And again, high risk, where trade secrets are really, really crucial and people are always trying to hack them. And just simply companies that have more stringent security needs due to increased compliance requirements. And when I hear compliance, I think of pharma, I think of financial, and it's not surprising that that is on the minds of many in those industries as well. So that's who it's designed for. And I should point out that there are different versions of this also for servers. Dell does have a server component verification to, in effect, do the same thing for server components, for and their components. That's for another webinar, but we're really focusing on laptops and PCs for today. But just want to call out, bottom line is Dell has really got our customers covered with a variety of solutions when it comes to platform certificates. But the benefits overall, what does it mean in the next slide here? I look at it as three benefits. One is that we verify devices are secure through setup. It ensures that Dell commercial devices are delivered and ready for deployment exactly as they were built by Dell Manufacturing. Second is to enhance IT security. And so organizations can align their security standards with zero trust principles and other emerging industry guidelines to meet the most demanding requirements for secure IT infrastructure. And then the last piece is to improve IT security operations by adding SCV to standard operating procedures for deployment. This allows a low-touch, low-risk enhancement for ultimately securing and securing as an overall organization's overall IT security operations. So next slide, we'll dive a little bit more into our versions of secured component verification. So I mentioned before the need for federal government. One thing that underscores is certain organizations are going to require the on-device version where we store the certificates on the device themselves. And then the other is a cloud-based version. We store the certificates on a secure Dell cloud, and then the customer goes out and gets them. Right now, these two different versions, they are offered differently across the world. So SCV on cloud, it's worldwide. It's available on commercial PCs. And then SCV on device, at this point, it's really a North American solution. We do have SKUs to match up those components for SCV. So we do have everybody covered in North America. We've got everybody covered worldwide, but we have a little bit more in the way of flexibility for air-gapped environments here in North America. The next slide just breaks it down a little bit more. And I won't get into the details of how it works for SCV on cloud, but what I will say is just the differences here, a couple things to call out. The needs. SCV on cloud, really best for cloud-based environments. Certificates are created at the factory. They're stored off host, as I mentioned, in a secure Dell cloud. And then how it's retrieved and validated, the IT team, they typically will set up support assist for business to deploy our packages, which include the Dell Trusted Device app. Dell Trusted Device app, it's a downloadable free app that we offer that provides maximum protections for biosecurity, but at the same time, it also offers the backing, in effect, the engine for secure component verification. And it collects telemetry information. And in this case, it collects information on the components. It is stored on that cloud environment, like I mentioned. And then how the customer gets it is they will view it with the help of the Dell Trusted Device app and Support Assist for Business. They can view it on our Tech Direct online portal, which a lot of organizations already use. The Tech Direct portal, really, it's a fleet level view of the security and health of your devices. And if you haven't seen it, if you're an organization that has seen it, you can see the benefits of it. You can see all these results in one version from a fleet level. So that's SCV on cloud, and it's covered, like I said, worldwide for a large, nearly all of our commercial PCs. SCV on device, a little bit more limited, as I mentioned. It's North America. It's for air-gapped environments, and these are gapped environments that they really can't use cloud-based apps. The certificates are created at our second touch facility where everything is essentially stored and and created there and modified there. And then the customer will use a third-party tool that they download from Dell support to validate. It's a little bit more of a manual process because of the air gap requirements. It's effective. It's what a lot of customers are looking for. But again, we're trying to encourage customers to really look at that SCV on cloud solution because once it's set up, it's a very simple, easy to use solution. It's not as manual. And it covers these same areas. And it gives our viewers a really quick and easy view of all those high-risk components from a fleet level as well as a device level glance. So the other piece on SCV on device, it is a solution that's covered with limited existing models across our commercial lineup. So it's not all of them, but they're some of our most popular SKUs. So we wanted to make sure we covered as many of these devices as possible with an SCV on device. So that is platform certificates and our secured component verification solutions. And I think the last piece here, or second to last piece here, is we'll just cover some of the additional offerings for North America. So we covered platform certificates, but as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, I did mention that we have tamper evidence services, which the next slide will show here. And that's tamper evident pallets, product seals available here in North America. Just a quick review. Dell tamper evident seals are added to seal the system before shipping to the final destination. Dell tamper evident tape is added to seal the system box. Dell tamper evident pallet seals are added before shipping to the final destination, and then they're all added separately for full pallet orders. You can see some examples of how these look, and you can see in the case of the seals what a tampered label looks like. It's been designed so people can easily see if it's been tampered with. I just want to point out and reiterate, these are add-on solutions. Not all customers feel the need for them. If they do need them, we do offer them. They're an additional price, a minor price for these additional services. The remaining area for additional safe supply chain services is device sanitation and reimaging. And so these are for customers that really they need the NIST level secure hard drive wipes, clear, purges, and reimaging, and that kind of thing. And our approach to the handling of data storage devices is to either sanitize the device in alignment with US Department of Commerce NIST standards, purge it, or clear in preparation for reuse. And in the event that Dell determines that the device cannot be secured through sanitization, Dell will destroy the device using physical shredding or such other appropriate physical destruction methods in prep for recycling and in accordance again with US Department of Commerce and these NIST standards. So Dell performs regular audits of its own facilities and operations, as well as its partners and suppliers who are authorized to perform data security processes regarding physical security and sanitization. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we have these processes and requirements of our vendors, and it most certainly applies to these third-party add-on solutions that I've just mentioned. So the last piece here in closing is that supply chain attacks are on the rise for everything, hardware, software, and in transit, and it touches all areas of the supply chain. Dell has market-leading supply chain security that covers these areas. For companies that require additional supply chain security, we are well-positioned with the solutions that we provide. I talked about platform certificates and secured component verification on cloud. That's our latest offering that was offered about a year and a half ago now, and that provides even greater security from factory to setup. And then I would say that if you, or I should also point out those additional second touch facility services that I mentioned in the last segment here. But the last piece here is please visit Dell Endpoint Security if you have more questions or you want to read up more on the areas. I think the last slide just covers resources. We've got a Dell supply chain security white paper, which goes into great detail. I covered a lot of the areas here, but there's certainly more in the white paper that's available for a download on the Dell Endpoint Security website. We've had a couple of blogs, so you'll see some blogs that we've talked about that cover supply chain security and secured component verification. And then, of course, we have data sheets and things like that for additional information on what the product is and how it might work. So we should have you covered if you have more questions and you want to do some more research on your own as you develop your own supply chain security strategies. That Dell is there for you with resources to help you develop that along the way. And so with that, I think we are covered here. We can move into questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. And just so everybody knows, we will have those resources on dtalk.com along with this recording. We will put all of that everywhere so you will have access to it. But we have had a couple of questions come in during the presentation, and the first one is from Core. So Core asked, while we trust Dell, the hardware is manufactured in China. What stops the Chinese factory from installing a network chip that has a back door, like they have done with other quote unquote secure equipment manufactured in China? You're still on mute, Tom. Sorry. Nandita, are you there? Could you possibly chime in on this one?
Hey there. Yeah, it looks like Tom might be having some technical difficulties, but I work closely with Tom in global marketing. And just, he mentioned a couple of resources where you can kind of take a deep dive into the extensive supplier due diligence that we do. The supply chain security white paper, for example, and we will link that at the end of the webinar. But as I was saying, we take supplier due diligence very seriously. You can, as part of our efforts to mitigate the very risk noted in the course question, we do some very rigorous, very rigorous onboarding process that involves key procedures that really helps to meet the high standards of our, integrity, security, quality, and reliability that we have woven in through our supply chain. And through this entire process, as we look at our suppliers and evaluate if they are the right supplier for us, we look at them as long-term partners. So you can get a sense of how deeply we do look into the background, and also, what does supply chain resilience look like working with these types of suppliers. So, and then as a routine part of our supplier relationship management or our SRM strategy, we also require our suppliers to undergo periodic performance reviews to check for exactly the type of risk that Core mentioned. Suppliers are comprehensively reviewed using a predetermined list of criteria, including cost, delivery, innovation, security, and adherence to our overall principles. So these are, all kind of a condition of doing business with Dell, and our end goal being to just keep our customers as safe as possible and constantly innovate our security.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nandita. Tom, I'm not sure if your audio is back quite yet. Oh, all right. Well, then, Nandita, I might keep you on the line so we can get this second question answered, and then we'll wrap it up. If anybody has other questions, please put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A. We'll do our best to get them all. But the next question that came in is, how do you ensure data of the cloud-based security servers when systems are working remotely from any kind of ransomware or malware attacks from hackers?
Fair question. So Dell takes security in general very seriously, of course, and we take a zero trust approach. Many of you will be familiar with zero trust, but it's a framework that we, as well as many other organizations, follow to ensure the security of all of our data, customer data, internal data. And that essentially revolves around the principle of trust no one. So we make sure that every time someone asks for access, we are verifying who they are, validating that they are a legitimate partner or entity asking for information. We're constantly monitoring all of our security measures, not just one and done set up, the physical security, factory security. Everything is under surveillance. So, for example, Tom walked through, the surveillance of our hardware security, our supply chain security, and our physical security within the factories. And similar to how you see uh, an organization have camera systems up, we have something similar internally as well. We leverage software to make sure that these types of attacks, like ransomware or malware attacks, we can spot them and deal with them as quickly as possible. So rest assured, we're taking a zero trust approach to securing our organization.
Wonderful. Thank you. That makes me feel pretty safe. Tom, if you if you've got anything to add, right, you can put it in the chat. I know your mic is still having some difficulties.
Can you hear me?
You're back. I hear you.
Yeah, I could hear my mic go out when it happened, so I knew something was weird, but it's back. No, Nandita covered that probably better than I could have. I think she described it very much in detail and exactly the kinds of things that I would have said in terms of our processes, our audits, and the fact the zero trust strategy, and the reality that we know that attacks are always changing and keep moving the targets. And we take that as part of our strategy to make sure with our vendors and factories and processes that we are always reviewing them, always changing them, always staying in front of it so that we do reduce that supply chain security risk. So it's a big part of our processes that we do in the manufacturing of our devices and shipment. But Nadita covered it really well, so thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Glad to have your audio back. We do have one final question that came in, which I believe is along the same lines. But do you, continuously review business supply chain plans from the suppliers, from dealers, from retailers?
I mean, in a word, yes. I mean, again, this is part of the zero trust strategies as well as our SDL process, the secure development lifecycle. It's a constant monitoring, constant process improvement, just to reduce risk, make sure that we are staying in touch and on top of these types of activities. So, yeah, the short-winded answer is yes. We take care of. We do handle all of that.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I mean, I think your presentation answered every other question everybody had. Only having three is definitely a good thing. That means the material was spot on. So thank you for that. And thank you everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate you. We really appreciate your time. Don't forget about the post-event survey. That once you hit end, it will pop up on your screen. So make sure you take that. It will also be in your email. And we will have on dtuck.com and in your email every resource that was available on this, including the slide deck, including the recording. So everything will be there. And if you have any other questions, please reach out. You can reach out to member services at dtuck.com. You can reach out anywhere you can find us within dtuck, and we will get you connected to whoever you need. But we really appreciate your time, everybody. Tom, Nandita, thank you both. I know this was fun to put on, and clearly our members enjoyed it. So everyone's saying great presentation, great information. So this was super valuable. And we'll see you again soon. So thank you, everybody. Tom, Nandita, do you guys have anything in closing, or happy as can be?
Yeah, again, thanks everybody for joining. If there are questions about but sure, Jack will be sending out follow-ups with resources and things. There's plenty more information to read on. We just scratched the surface today, so more resources available should you need them. But thanks everybody for participating and asking good questions.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody.